What if the best war movies of the 1970s are not the famous titles everyone keeps repeating? While a few classics took all the praise, darker and stranger films were pushed aside, forgotten, or barely released. Some questioned military glory. Others made celebrated commanders look dangerously human. Before we enter the battlefield, hit the like button, share this video with another classic film fan, and subscribe to the channel. Number 35. Zeppelin, 1971. A giant airship floating above the clouds. Sounds like the beginning of a grand adventure. But this British production turns that beautiful machine into a moving prison filled with spies. Michael York plays Geoffrey Richter Douglas, a Scottish officer whose German background makes him useful to British intelligence during the First World War. He is ordered to appear as though he has changed sides, enter Germany, and discover what the enemy's newest Zeppelin is secretly designed to do. The assignment places Geoffrey between two identities. German officers believe he may become one of them, while his British handlers treat him like a tool that can be abandoned if the plan collapses. The Zeppelin itself is the real star. Its narrow corridors, exposed framework, observation areas, and enormous gas-filled body create constant tension because one spark could turn the entire mission into disaster. The most memorable sequence comes when the airship attempts a daring raid on a Scottish castle containing priceless historical records. Soldiers descend while the Zeppelin hovers above, and Geoffrey must decide whether to protect his cover or stop the operation. The scene mixes aerial spectacle with an old-fashioned commando raid, but the practical sets give it a weight modern effects often miss. The story occasionally stretches belief, yet that is part of its charm. Rather than another trench drama, it offers espionage, divided loyalty, and a weapon that looks majestic until you imagine being trapped inside it. Few war movies use the fragile elegance of early aviation this effectively. Number 34. The Last Grenade, 1970. Two former comrades become enemies in this hard, unusual mercenary story, starring Stanley Baker and Alex Cord. Baker plays Major Harry Grigsby, a professional soldier betrayed by Kip Thompson, the charismatic fighter who once served beside him. Thompson abandons Grigsby's unit during an operation in Africa, leaving men behind and beginning a personal conflict that refuses to remain on one continent. Years later, Grigsby is drawn into fighting near Hong Kong, where Thompson has built influence among armed forces operating along the border. The official mission involves stopping raids and restoring control, but Grigsby sees only one real objective: reaching the man who destroyed his command. Their rivalry gives the film the structure of a Western, with tropical hills and military outposts replacing dusty frontier towns. A famous stretch of the movie follows Grigsby's patrol through steep country, while Thompson's fighters attack from positions that seem impossible to locate. Explosions and rifle fire are important, yet the real tension comes from Grigsby realizing that his opponent knows exactly how he thinks. Every tactic has already been studied by the man he is hunting. The film also features Richard Attenborough and Honor Blackman, but its strongest element is Stanley Baker's exhausted intensity. Grigsby is not a shining hero. He is a soldier whose sense of duty has become tangled with pride and revenge. Some romantic material slows the pursuit, and the politics remain deliberately vague. Even so, the rough locations, bitter performances, and final confrontation make this a fascinating bridge between traditional colonial adventures and the more cynical war movies that would dominate the decade. If forgotten war cinema is your kind of history lesson, make sure you are subscribed before we continue. And send this video to a friend who still believes every 1970s war movie became famous. Number 33. The Mackenzie Break, 1970. Most prisoner of war movies ask viewers to support Allied soldiers escaping from German guards. This one reverses the familiar arrangement and makes German prisoners the men planning the break. The story unfolds inside Camp Mackenzie, a compound in Scotland during the Second World War. Captain Connor, played by Brian Keith, is sent there after prisoners begin openly challenging the British officers. Their leader, submarine commander Willy Schluter, appears to be encouraging riots and humiliating the guards, but Connor suspects the disorder is hiding something much larger. What follows is less a battlefield film than a battle of intelligence. Connor studies coded letters, missing equipment, false tunnel entrances, and carefully staged confrontations. Schluter responds by creating so much noise that the real escape plan becomes invisible. One of the movie's signature scenes erupts when British guards use powerful fire hoses against prisoners near the fences. Bodies slide through mud, orders are ignored, and the camp seems close to complete collapse. Yet the riot is partly theater. While officers focus on the disturbance, other prisoners continue preparing a route toward the coast, where a submarine may be waiting. Brian Keith gives Connor the rough manner of a detective rather than a polished gentleman officer. Helmut Greim makes Schluter disciplined, intelligent, and difficult to dismiss as a simple villain. Their mutual respect creates uncomfortable suspense, because the escape is exciting even when viewers understand who is attempting it. Cold weather, mud, German dialogue, and an ending that moves beyond the camp keep the film grounded. It remains one of the decade's smartest variations on the prison escape formula. Number 32. Too Late the Hero, 1970. A soldier who has survived by avoiding danger is forced into the mission he never wanted in Robert Aldrich's bitter Pacific adventure. Michael Caine plays Lieutenant Sam Lawson, an American naval officer who understands Japanese and has carefully remained far from frontline fighting. His comfortable arrangement ends when he is ordered to join a British patrol on an enemy-held island. Their objective sounds simple: move through the jungle, destroy a radio transmitter, and prevent a warning from reaching Japanese forces. The unit Lawson joins is exhausted and divided. Cliff Robertson plays Lieutenant Hearn, who still believes the mission must be completed. Ian Bannon nearly steals the film as Private Tosh Hearn, a bitter survivor who no longer pretends sacrifice is automatically noble. The unforgettable opening image shows soldiers racing across a huge field toward their base, while fire follows them from the jungle. Men inside the camp watch, but helping would expose everyone. That wide, empty ground becomes a cruel test. Safety is visible, yet reaching it seems almost impossible. Later, the patrol captures a Japanese officer and attempts to use false radio messages. The plan breaks down as personalities clash, supplies disappear, and the survivors begin deciding whether duty matters more than getting home. Aldrich strips away the cheerful teamwork found in older commando movies. These men argue, hesitate, and sometimes behave selfishly. Heroism arrives late, confused, and without any guarantee that someone will be remembered for it. The film struggled commercially, despite its cast and scale. Today, its cynical dialogue and refusal to create clean heroes make it feel far more modern than many better-known Pacific War pictures. Number 31. Waterloo, 1970. Nothing in modern computer-generated warfare looks quite like thousands of real performers moving across an enormous landscape. Sergei Bondarchuk's historical epic recreates Napoleon's final campaign with a physical scale rarely repeated. Rod Steiger plays Napoleon as he returns from exile, regains the loyalty of the French army, and marches toward the coalition gathering against him. Christopher Plummer gives the Duke of Wellington a cooler, sharper presence. The movie builds toward the 1815 battle, where both commanders understand that one afternoon could decide the political future of Europe. The famous scene is the charge of the Scots Greys. Cavalry surges through smoke and infantry lines, while the camera rises high enough to show formations changing across the field. Because the horses, soldiers, cannon, mud, and distance are physically present, the sequence feels dangerous in a way digital crowds rarely achieve. Another remarkable moment shows French infantry advancing in large squares, while artillery tears openings through the formation. The men close the gaps and continue. Bondarchuk emphasizes geometry, as much as courage, turning the battlefield into a moving map where every adjustment costs lives. Steiger's performance is intentionally large. His Napoleon talks to himself, remembers earlier victories, and shifts between confidence and panic. Plummer's Wellington appears calmer, but his dry remarks hide the pressure of holding a mixed coalition together until Prussian support arrives. The film's financial disappointment helped discourage other giant historical productions. That failure is exactly why it now feels like a lost object from another age. It may not be overlooked by dedicated war film fans, but general audiences rarely discuss it beside more familiar epics. Its battle remains astonishing. Number 30. Murphy's War, 1971. Peter O'Toole spends this entire film fighting a battle that has ended everywhere, except inside his own mind. Murphy is an Irish crewman aboard a merchant ship operating near Venezuela during the final days of the Second World War. A German submarine sinks the vessel and attacks the survivors to prevent anyone from reporting its hiding place. Murphy reaches a small missionary settlement, where a pacifist doctor treats his injuries. He should feel fortunate to live. Instead, he becomes consumed by the knowledge that the submarine remains upriver. He turns wreckage into weapons. A damaged floatplane becomes his first chance to strike back. One of the best sequences shows Murphy teaching himself to fly, bouncing across the river and dragging the aircraft into the air through instinct rather than skill. The moment is funny, exciting, and sad, because every successful attempt takes him deeper into obsession. His improvised aerial attack is equally memorable. Homemade explosives fall toward the submarine while the plane circles overhead and the crew fires back from below. It resembles a heroic adventure scene, yet director Peter Yates keeps reminding us that Murphy is destroying the life he could still have. Then word arrives that Germany has surrendered. For the doctor and the settlement, the war is over. For Murphy, surrender means nothing. He uses a floating crane, an unexploded torpedo, and remaining machinery to continue his campaign. The tropical river becomes a psychological prison. Murphy can leave physically, but emotionally, he is still beside the sunken ship. The ending makes the film's point without comfort. Revenge can keep a war alive long after nations stop fighting. Number 29. Von Richthofen and Brown, 1971. Roger Corman approaches the legend of the Red Baron by placing two enemy pilots on parallel paths rather than building a simple hero versus villain story. John Philip Law plays Manfred von Richthofen, the disciplined German aristocrat whose victories turn him into a national symbol. Don Stroud plays Canadian pilot Roy Brown, presented as rougher, more practical, and increasingly shaped by the same conflict. The movie watches aviation change from a gentleman's contest into industrial warfare. Early pilots wave, recognize opponents, and cling to romantic rules. As casualties rise, newer aircraft and harsher tactics make those customs look almost absurd. Richthofen wants to preserve an image of honor, even while the war makes that image impossible. A memorable sequence shows the German squadron's brightly painted aircraft taking off together. The colors look almost festive from a distance, but the formation soon enters a sky where engines fail, wings break, and young men vanish in seconds. Corman used real flying footage and full-sized aircraft, giving the battles an unstable physical energy. The film also shows Richthofen visiting wounded men and confronting officers who want his fame more than his honest opinion. Brown, meanwhile, becomes less interested in ceremony and more focused on ending fights quickly. Historical details are simplified, and the final connection between the two men is shaped for drama. Yet the film is more thoughtful than its exploitation-era reputation suggests. It questions whether famous aces controlled their legends or were trapped by them. Rather than celebrating one side, it presents two pilots being consumed by the public identities built around them. That melancholy view of heroism makes the movie worth rediscovering. Number 28. Johnny Got His Gun, 1971. Few war movies remove the battlefield so completely, while making its consequences feel so immediate. Timothy Bottoms plays Joe Bonham, an American soldier who awakens in a military hospital after an artillery blast during the First World War. He cannot see, hear, speak, or move in any recognizable way. The doctors believe he has no conscious mind, but Joe remains fully aware inside the body they are keeping alive. Dalton Trumbo, adapting and directing his own novel, moves between the hospital's black and white reality and Joe's color memories. He recalls his father, his girlfriend, his departure for war, and imagined conversations with an ordinary Jesus, played by Donald Sutherland. These scenes initially offer escape, then become painful reminders of everything Joe can no longer reach. The movie's most famous sequence begins when Joe recognizes that a nurse is tracing letters on his chest. He attempts to respond by moving his head in a repeated pattern. What appears to the staff as meaningless motion is Morse code. Joe is finally communicating, and his request is devastating. Either allow him to die or display him publicly so people can see what war has made. The officers reject both choices. Keeping Joe hidden protects the institution from the truth his body represents. There are no heroic charges and almost no conventional action. The battle continues through memory, silence, and the terrible distance between a conscious man and the people surrounding him. The film became better known after footage appeared in Metallica's One video, but the complete work remains underseen. It is difficult, theatrical, and sometimes surreal, yet its central idea is impossible to forget. Number 27. The Last Valley, 1971. Its greatest miracle is not victory. It is a small place that has somehow escaped war. Omar Sharif plays Vogel, a teacher wandering through 17th-century Europe, while the 30 Years' War spreads famine, disease, religious hatred, and armed bands across the countryside. He discovers an isolated valley that remains fertile and untouched. Soon, mercenaries led by Michael Caine's unnamed captain find it as well. The soldiers could seize the food and destroy the village. Vogel persuades their commander that the valley will be more useful alive through winter. An uneasy agreement begins. The mercenaries offer protection, while the villagers provide shelter and supplies. Yet peace depends on people who do not trust one another. Religious divisions, romantic jealousy, fear of outsiders, and the soldiers' habits of violence slowly enter the valley. One of the strongest scenes comes when the captain stops his men from beginning the usual cycle of looting. Caine does not play the decision as sudden kindness. He studies the fields, the stores, and the approaching winter, then chooses order because destruction would waste a valuable refuge. That practical choice creates hope, but it also reveals how fragile the arrangement is. Snow eventually closes the valley from the wider world. For a moment, history appears to stop. John Barry's haunting music and the mountain photography make the settlement look protected by nature itself. But soldiers cannot forget what they have learned, and villagers cannot accept every compromise required for survival. James Clavell's expensive production failed to find a large audience, yet its central question remains powerful. Can peace survive when everyone protecting it has been trained by war? Number 26. Slaughterhouse-Five, 1972. Billy Pilgrim does not remember war in a straight line. He falls through it without warning. Michael Sachs plays the American soldier who becomes a prisoner during the Second World War, survives the destruction of Dresden, returns home, grows older, and experiences life as though every moment exists at once. George Roy Hill's adaptation of Kurt Vonnegut's novel moves between Billy's wartime captivity, his empty American adulthood, and an existence on the distant planet Tralfamadore. Yet the sudden transitions capture how traumatic memory can interrupt ordinary life. The most famous sequence follows Billy and other prisoners into Dresden. They are housed inside a slaughterhouse before the city is transformed overnight. Hill avoids presenting the bombing as a conventional action spectacle. The survivors emerge into ruins that resemble another planet, surrounded by silence and structures that no longer seem connected to human life. Another unforgettable passage shows Billy watching events in reverse. Aircraft appear to remove destruction, gather fire, and carry dangerous materials away until weapons are returned to harmless elements. It is a childlike fantasy of history undoing itself, and one of the film's sharpest images. Valerie Perrine brings humor and sadness to Billy's later life, while the music of Bach, performed by Glenn Gould, gives the time shifts an unexpected calm. The science fiction elements may cause some viewers to overlook it as a war movie, but Dresden is the emotional center of everything Billy experiences. Time travel becomes the only language capable of expressing a man who never truly left the ruins. The movie is strange, humane, and still one of cinema's boldest attempts to film memory. Number 25. The Dawns Here Are Quiet, 1972. A remote anti-aircraft station appears to be a safe assignment during the Second World War. Senior Sergeant Vaskov commands a group of young women in Karelia and initially worries more about discipline, noise, and local distractions than direct enemy contact. Then one soldier sees German troops moving through the forest. Vaskov selects 5 women and enters the wilderness, expecting to intercept a small patrol. They soon discover a much larger force attempting to cross the region. Cut off from support, the group must delay the soldiers and prevent them from reaching strategically important territory. Director Stanislav Rostotsky gives each woman memories, hopes, and a life beyond the uniform. The film repeatedly moves from the cold forest into warmer images of families, romance, motherhood, and futures that may never arrive. Those passages are essential because they prevent the characters from becoming anonymous figures waiting for a tragic ending. One of the most remembered sequences follows a dangerous crossing through marshland. A routine movement turns into a desperate struggle as the ground itself seems to swallow anyone who chooses the wrong step. Vaskov can see what is happening, but cannot easily reach the person in danger. Nature becomes as unforgiving as the enemy patrol. The later encounters are small, confusing, and deeply personal. These defenders are not trying to win the entire war. They are buying time in a forest where no large audience will witness what they do. The film became enormously popular in the Soviet Union and received an Academy Award nomination, yet many Western viewers still do not know it. Its patient storytelling makes The Final Dawn almost unbearable. Number 24. Hitler, The Last 10 Days, 1973. Years before later productions entered the Berlin bunker, Alec Guinness played a collapsing dictator surrounded by officials who were still pretending orders could change reality. The story is seen through the fictional Captain Hoffman, a young officer assigned to the underground headquarters during the final days of April 1945. Above them, Berlin is breaking apart. Inside, maps are moved, imaginary armies are discussed, and exhausted staff members wait for permission to admit what everyone already knows. Guinness avoids copying surface mannerisms alone. His performance shifts between charm, suspicion, self-pity, and explosive rage, presenting a leader who treats military disaster as a personal betrayal. One of the movie's strongest scenes occurs when officers explain that units ordered to attack no longer exist in meaningful strength. The room becomes silent before Hitler erupts against commanders, soldiers, and the German people themselves. What makes the moment effective is the reaction of everyone listening. Some appear frightened. Others look almost relieved that the fantasy has finally revealed its desperation. The film also contrasts the claustrophobic bunker with black and white images of the ruined city. Celebrations, meals, and conversations below ground seem increasingly unreal, while civilians and teenage defenders face the consequences outside. The production cannot match the detail of later versions, and some scenes feel theatrical. Yet that limited space creates pressure. Doors close, corridors narrow, and every new report removes another possible escape. Guinness reportedly approached the role with hesitation, and the film never asks viewers to admire the figure at its center. Instead, it studies how a failed regime continues performing authority until even its own followers can no longer believe the performance. Number 23. Battle of Suceska, 1973. Hollywood rarely explored the Yugoslav partisan struggle on the scale achieved here. Also released as The Fifth Offensive, the film recreates the 1943 campaign to surround and eliminate Josip Broz Tito's partisan forces in the mountains of Yugoslavia. Richard Burton plays Tito, but the movie's real hero is the exhausted collective of fighters, nurses, civilians, and wounded people trying to escape a tightening ring. Their objective is not capturing one bridge or destroying a single installation. It is keeping the movement alive. Aircraft cross real valleys. Columns move over mountains. Explosions erupt around large groups of performers. The physical scale is impressive, yet the smaller choices give the spectacle meaning. Commanders must decide which route can support the wounded. Medical workers struggle to move people who may slow everyone down. Fighters understand that abandoning them could save the column physically while destroying the principles holding it together. A powerful sequence follows the attempt to cross exposed mountain ground under air attack. The landscape offers almost no protection, and the long lines of people reveal how vulnerable the entire force has become. Individuals disappear inside an event larger than any one character. Burton plays Tito with authority, rather than endless shouting. He receives incomplete reports, studies impossible alternatives, and understands that leadership may mean choosing the route with the least terrible outcome. The production was among the largest mounted in Yugoslavia and used its locations to preserve a sense of national memory. Outside the region, however, it is rarely placed beside famous Western epics. That neglect hides a film whose practical scale, mountain photography, and focus on collective survival remain extraordinary. Number 22, Massacre in Rome, 1973. This tense historical drama turns a calculation into the engine of the entire story. After Italian partisans attack a German police unit in occupied Rome, the authorities order a reprisal. Lieutenant Colonel Herbert Kappler, played by Richard Burton, is instructed to produce a list of prisoners and civilians who will be killed in response. Marcello Mastroianni plays Father Pietro Antonelli, a priest drawn into the effort to save people as the number demanded by the order continues rising. The movie moves between resistance networks, prison cells, offices, and Vatican corridors, showing how every institution responds when time is disappearing. Disturbing scenes involve the construction of the list. Names are added for political activity, minor accusations, Jewish identity, personal convenience, or because someone needs to fill an empty space. Burton's Kappler does not behave like a wild movie villain. He works through paperwork, telephones, and schedules, which makes the process colder. Another memorable sequence follows families and clergy searching for information while officials avoid responsibility. Everyone seems to know something, yet no one possesses enough authority or courage to stop the operation. The film builds toward the Ardeatine Caves, but director George P. Cosmatos does not treat the location as an action climax. It becomes the final destination of an administrative machine that has been operating all day. Historical arguments surrounding responsibility created controversy around the production, and some details remain debated. Still, the drama's central power lies in watching mass punishment become a problem of numbers, transport, and deadlines. It reminds viewers that enormous crimes are not always carried out through dramatic speeches. Sometimes they advance through lists quietly completed in rooms. Number 21. Lacombe. Lucien, 1974. Louis Malle's film offers an uncomfortable portrait of collaboration because its central character does not begin with a clear political belief. Lucien is a teenage worker, living in occupied France in 1944. He tries to join the resistance, but the local group rejects him, partly because they consider him unreliable and immature. A chance encounter then brings him into the headquarters of the French Gestapo. The collaborators offer alcohol, authority, money, and the attention he has never received elsewhere. Lucien begins working for them casually. The terrible point is not that he has been converted by a grand argument. He simply discovers that power feels good. He later becomes involved with France Horn, a Jewish girl hiding with her father and grandmother. His attraction to her creates no sudden moral awakening. Lucien can protect the family, then frighten them, because he barely understands the power he carries. One of the film's most revealing scenes shows him entering the family's apartment, wearing his new authority like a costume. He touches possessions, asks questions, and behaves as though affection can erase the threat of the organization behind him. France recognizes that every gentle gesture may become dangerous without warning. Pierre Blaise plays Lucien with a blank, unsettling naturalism. Malle refuses to explain him through speeches or childhood trauma. The character's emptiness becomes the explanation. This is not a traditional combat film, but it is absolutely a war movie. It shows occupation transforming a directionless boy into an instrument of control. Its refusal to offer easy condemnation or redemption remains provocative, and the final images make chance feel as powerful as ideology. Number 20. The Execution of Private Slovik, 1974. Some war films show soldiers punished for refusing to fight. This television production asks why one frightened man was selected to become an example. Martin Sheen plays Eddie Slovik, a young American drafted during the Second World War after time in a reformatory. Slovik openly admits that frontline combat terrifies him. After becoming separated from his unit, he refuses to return and signs a confession. He believes the army will imprison him, which seems preferable to entering battle. Instead, his written statement becomes evidence in a court-martial that moves toward a sentence he never expected to be carried out. The movie follows hearings, appeals, conversations with a priest, and Slovik's realization that no authority intends to stop the process. Sheen avoids making him a flawless victim. Eddie can be stubborn, immature, manipulative, and convinced that someone will rescue him at the last moment. Those weaknesses make his fate more troubling. The most powerful scene is his final morning. Procedures are completed quietly. Soldiers adjust restraints. A chaplain remains close. And Slovik tries to understand how thousands of desertion cases have led to this particular outcome. The film does not turn the moment into a display of sudden battlefield courage. Fear remains present until the end. Historically, Slovik became the only American serviceman whose death sentence for desertion was carried out during the Second World War. The production treats that fact as a moral question rather than a piece of trivia. Originally made for NBC, it proved television could deliver a war drama as serious as any theatrical release. It remains a restrained, painful study of military discipline and selective punishment. Number 19. The Old Gun, 1975. A family story becomes a personal resistance thriller when Philippe Noiret's Julien Dondieu discovers that the war has reached his safe place. Julien is a surgeon living in occupied France in 1944. Worried about increasing danger, he sends his wife Clara, played by Romy Schneider, and their daughter to the family's countryside chateau. When he visits later, the property is silent. Soldiers have occupied the building, and Julien finds that his family is gone. The doctor, who has spent his life preserving people, takes an old sporting rifle from its hiding place and begins using the chateau against the men inside it. Secret passages, locked doors, stairways, and hidden rooms become his advantage. He is not an experienced commando. He survives because he knows where walls connect and which corridor allows him to disappear before soldiers reach his position. The movie's most memorable technique is its use of flashbacks. Between tense scenes in the dark chateau, Julien remembers Clara in warm sunlight, laughing and moving through a peaceful life. Romy Schneider's brightness makes the present feel even colder. Every memory explains why Julien continues, but it also shows that revenge cannot restore what has been taken. Robert Enrico does not make the transformation clean or heroic. Julien becomes methodical, frightened, and increasingly separated from the person he once was. The old rifle is only part of the weapon. The building itself seems to fight beside him. The film won the first César Award for Best Film and was a major French success, yet it remains underseen internationally. Its mixture of romance, grief, and suspense gives familiar revenge material emotional force. Number 18. Operation Daybreak, 1975. Before movies returned to Operation Anthropoid, this production delivered a tense account of the mission to strike Reinhard Heydrich in occupied Prague. The story follows Czechoslovak agents Josef Gabčík, Jan Kubiš, and Karel Čerda after training in Britain and parachuting into their homeland. Their objective carries political importance, but the film emphasizes the network required to make it possible. Families open their homes. Resistance members carry messages. Priests provide hiding places. Every person who assists the agents places relatives and neighbors in danger. The best-known scene recreates the roadside attack on Heydrich's open car. Gabčík steps forward, but his weapon fails at the critical instant. Kubish throws an explosive device toward the vehicle, creating confusion instead of the clean operation they planned. The scene works because machinery, timing, and human reactions all break down at once. The mission does not end with the attack. The movie follows the reprisals, the search for the agents, and the betrayal that reveals their hiding place. Its final section moves into the Church of Saints Cyril and Methodius, where German forces surround the building. The defenders fire from windows and later retreat into the crypt. Water is forced into the chamber as soldiers search for another entrance. The flooded underground space has become the image most viewers remember because the men understand that rescue is no longer coming. Director Louis Gilbert filmed in Prague, allowing streets and buildings to give the story physical authenticity. More importantly, the movie refuses to treat successful resistance as cost-free adventure. It follows courage into retaliation, betrayal, and consequence, making it one of the strongest versions of the operation. Number 17. Overlord, 1975. This black-and-white British film feels like a young soldier wandering into history's nightmare. Brian Sterner plays Tom, a recruit called into service before the Normandy invasion. He is not presented as a hero or coward. He simply moves through training while becoming convinced that the operation ahead will end his life. Director Stuart Cooper blends newly filmed material with archival footage from the Imperial War Museum. The transitions are so constructed that Tom sometimes appears to be walking directly into real wartime images. Tanks, bomb damage, factory work, troop movements, and civilian preparations surround his small fictional story. One memorable sequence follows Tom traveling by train while military machinery fills the landscape outside. He imagines death before experiencing battle, and the archival images make his fear seem like knowledge arriving from the future. Another scene shows him beginning a possible romance, but even tenderness feels temporary because the invasion controls every thought. The title refers to Operation Overlord, yet the film spends little time on strategic explanation. It focuses on waiting for equipment, waiting for orders, waiting in transport, and waiting for the moment when a person becomes one figure inside an enormous historical photograph. When the troops finally approach the coast, Cooper avoids triumphant release. The landing craft, helmets, sea, and crowded bodies feel like pieces of a process that has already decided where Tom belongs. The movie won recognition at the Berlin Film Festival, but remained obscure for years. Its scale is deceptive. By combining one fictional recruit with authentic images of millions preparing for invasion, it turns individual fear into something both intimate and vast. Number 16. Seven Beauties, 1975. Lena Wertmüller's film is funny, ugly, tragic, and deliberately difficult to classify. Giancarlo Giannini plays Pasqualino, a vain criminal from Naples, who believes masculine pride can control every situation. He gains his nickname from seven sisters, whose reputation he claims to defend. After a crime and a period inside an institution, Pasqualino is sent into the Italian army. He deserts with a companion, is captured by German forces, and enters a concentration camp where every rule he once understood becomes useless. Survival replaces honor, loyalty, and even dignity. The film moves backward and forward through his life, showing how comic arrogance gradually meets a system that cannot be charmed in any familiar way. Giannini makes Pasqualino ridiculous, without making his desperation easy to dismiss. The most famous sequence involves his attempt to gain protection from the camp commandant, played by Shirley Stoller. Pasqualino decides seduction is the only tool available. The encounter is intentionally grotesque rather than romantic. He performs confidence while terror controls every movement, and the commandant watches with almost complete emotional distance. Later, he is forced into an impossible choice, involving other prisoners. The scene destroys whatever remains of his self-created heroic identity. Survival is achieved, but the film asks what exactly has survived. Wertmüller surrounds this journey with satire, abrupt changes of tone, and images of pre-war family life. Some viewers may resist its mixture of comedy and suffering, yet that instability is central. Pasqualino has spent his life turning reality into performance, and war finally gives him a reality performance cannot repair. It remains one of the decade's boldest examinations of survival without moral comfort. Number 15. Aces High, 1976. Many aviation adventures present fighter pilots as fearless knights of the sky. This British drama shows that image being performed by men who are close to emotional collapse. Peter Firth plays Lieutenant Stephen Croft, a pilot arriving at a Royal Flying Corps squadron during the First World War. Croft is excited to serve under Major John Gresham, played by Malcolm McDowell, a former school hero. The man he finds is exhausted, dependent on alcohol, and forced to greet inexperienced replacements who may survive only a few days. The flying scenes use real aircraft and physical aerial photography. Planes shake, formations separate, engines fail, and the pilots appear exposed inside machines that offer almost no protection. Each flight has the instability of men trusting fabric, wood, and luck. One of the strongest scenes occurs during a formal dinner. Officers drink, joke, and follow squadron traditions, while everyone silently understands that empty seats may appear by the next evening. Gresham performs confidence for Croft, but his expression reveals the effort required to maintain it. Another memorable moment follows a new pilot whose first operation becomes a test no amount of classroom preparation could match. The squadron reacts with the numb routine of people who cannot mourn fully, without becoming unable to fly again. The film adapts the emotional structure of R.C. Sherriff's Journey's End, moving trench tension into an airfield and drawing additional material from pilot Cecil Lewis's memoir. That combination works beautifully. Rather than asking who wins an aerial contest, Aces High asks how long a person can repeatedly enter the sky while pretending fear is only a private weakness. Number 14. Black and White in Color, 1976. War begins accidentally in this French Ivorian satire set in colonial Africa during the First World War. A group of French settlers lives beside German-controlled territory, focused on routine and rivalries, not European politics. When delayed newspapers reveal that France and Germany are now enemies, the colonists suddenly decide they must begin fighting. The absurdity is clear. Men who barely understand military planning begin creating uniforms, speeches, and strategies. African villagers are recruited into a conflict that has little to do with their lives, while the Europeans treat patriotic enthusiasm as another way to display importance. John Carmé plays Sergeant Bosselet, one of the few men who sees how badly the operation is organized. Jacques Spicer's Hubert Fresnoy gradually becomes more capable, but his efficiency creates a new problem. Once the settlers learn how to fight, their harmless foolishness turns into organized destruction. A famous sequence shows the improvised French force marching with great ceremony before discovering that the German side is confused. The battle resembles a school performance until real consequences interrupt the comedy. Jean-Jacques Annaud keeps the tone light long enough for viewers to see how quickly pride manufactures enemies. The title itself is a joke about European ideas of civilization and the racial order imposed on Africa. The colonists claim to represent progress, while forcing local people to carry the danger. The film won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film, yet it is rarely included in war movie discussions. That omission is unfortunate. Beneath its cheerful surface lies an argument. Many conflicts continue because people would rather obey distant identities than question who benefits from the fighting. Number 13. The Fifth Seal, 1976. Four men drinking in a Budapest tavern believe they are discussing a philosophical puzzle. It is 1944. Hungary is controlled by the Arrow Cross, and safety depends on knowing when silence matters. A watchmaker asks the group whether they would rather live as a cruel ruler who feels no guilt or as an innocent victim who retains moral purity while suffering terribly. The conversation becomes playful and personal. Each man imagines that his answer reveals courage. A wounded photographer sitting nearby listens, feels mocked, and reports them to the authorities. The key section begins after the friends are arrested. Their debate becomes a physical test. They are taken before a helpless prisoner, and told that freedom depends on striking him. Suddenly, choosing dignity is no longer something performed over drinks. It has a face, a sound, and a cost. Director Zoltan Fabri fills the tavern scenes with dark humor and detail. Food, family, work, and small complaints make the men recognizable before the system reduces them to bodies awaiting a decision. The watchmaker, played by Lajos Jose, appears cynical, but later information reveals acts of courage that complicate everything he has said. There are no battlefield charges here. The war exists in rooms where power forces civilians to participate in humiliation. The question is not whether these men can defeat an army. It is whether they can remain the people they believe themselves to be. The Fifth Seal is one of Hungary's greatest films, yet it remains far less known internationally than other European wartime dramas. Its final moral test is simple to describe, but hard to answer honestly. Number 12. The Eagle Has Landed, 1976. A plan to kidnap Winston Churchill becomes convincing in John Sturges's final film. Robert Duvall plays Colonel Rattle, a German officer ordered to examine whether an operation against the British Prime Minister might be possible. What begins as an unrealistic command slowly develops into a mission. Michael Caine plays Colonel Kurt Steiner, a paratrooper officer punished after intervening when civilians are being transported. Donald Sutherland appears as Liam Devlin, an Irish Republican recruited to assist the unit inside England. Their target is a Norfolk village, where Churchill is expected to visit. The German commandos arrive, disguised as Polish troops, and begin establishing control without alarming local residents. The operation might succeed until an accident reveals the truth. During a training display, one soldier saves a child from a water wheel, and his uniform is torn open, exposing German insignia beneath the disguise. That scene is the movie's turning point. A humane impulse destroys the secrecy required by the mission. The village changes instantly from an English setting into a trapped battlefield where church walls, cottages, and narrow roads limit every movement. Caine gives Steiner dignity without pretending the mission is morally simple. Sutherland's Devlin adds humor and unpredictability, while Jenny Aguter's local character becomes emotionally connected to a man whose loyalties remain dangerous. The film is better known than several titles here, but it is often dismissed as a routine adventure beside Sturges's earlier classics. That underrates its discipline, suspense, and German perspective. The commandos are professionals, yet conscience repeatedly interferes with military planning. In this story, failure begins not with cowardice, but with one soldier choosing to save a life. Number 11. March or Die, 1977. The war has ended, but Major William Foster has not escaped it. Gene Hackman plays the exhausted Legion officer ordered to lead recruits into Morocco. Their mission is to protect an archaeological expedition whose work threatens local tribes and invites another conflict immediately. The recruits include Marco Segrain, a thief played by Terence Hill, who joins the Legion to avoid prison. Catherine Deneuve plays Simone Picard, whose presence connects romance, grief, and the motives surrounding the expedition. Max von Sydow appears as the scholar determined to uncover an ancient site despite warnings. Foster drills the recruits, teaching that the Legion offers no comfortable future. He knows many of them are running from something, and he does not promise that service will transform them into better men. The most memorable stretch comes when the column crosses desert toward the threatened excavation. Heat, distance, and limited water weaken the men before the enemy appears. Later, the Legion forms defensive lines around the ruins as mounted fighters gather across the landscape. The scene recalls older adventure epics, but Hackman's weary performance prevents it from feeling purely romantic. Foster understands that political pride has placed everyone in danger. Marco initially treats life as a game, yet the march forces him to decide whether freedom means escaping responsibility or accepting it. The film received mixed reactions and never became the classic its cast suggested. Still, its desert photography, Maurice Jarre score, and melancholy view of soldiers discarded after one war make it compelling. The title sounds heroic, but the movie knows marching and dying are often ordered by people standing far away. Number 10. The Boys in Company C, 1978. Released before several famous Vietnam films, this ensemble drama follows 5 Marines from boot camp into a conflict where official logic seems completely separated from survival. The recruits include a reluctant writer, a streetwise hustler, an idealistic young man, a rebellious troublemaker, and a dealer who unexpectedly develops into a capable soldier. Training attempts to erase their differences. The boot camp section is loud, aggressive, darkly funny, and notable for an early appearance by real former drill instructor R. Lee Ermey. Yet the film does not remain a training comedy. Once the men arrive in Vietnam, every promise about discipline and purpose begins collapsing. A supply mission costs lives, only for the survivors to discover they were transporting luxury items for an officer's private celebration. The incident summarizes a system where danger is carried by men who are rarely told the true value of an objective. The movie's most famous sequence is a soccer match against a South Vietnamese team. Company C is ordered to lose because officials believe the result will improve relations. In return, the Marines are promised relief from combat. If they win, they will be sent toward Khe Sanh. The men understand the arrangement, but pride prevents them from deliberately surrendering the game. What begins like a sports comedy becomes a bitter metaphor. Winning a meaningless contest may guarantee defeat in the struggle that matters, staying alive. Sidney J. Fury balances satire, action, friendship, and frustration without producing a masterpiece. Its unevenness feels connected to the character's experience. They keep waiting for the war to make sense, while every new order proves that sense may never arrive. Number 9. Go Tell the Spartans, 1978. This film looks at the Vietnam War in 1964, when involvement was still described as advice and support, rather than the conflict it would soon become. Burt Lancaster plays Major Asa Barker, an officer commanding advisors who can already see the direction events are taking. Barker is ordered to occupy Muc Wa, an abandoned outpost of little value. French soldiers failed there years earlier, leaving graves and a warning carved in stone. The inscription refers to the Spartans at Thermopylae, men remembered for remaining at their post. In this setting, the words feel less inspiring than ominous. The unit includes professionals, inexperienced replacements, and South Vietnamese troops whose motives and loyalties cannot be reduced to simple categories. Barker requests equipment and support, but headquarters responds through delays, political calculations, and confidence unsupported by the reality on the ground. A memorable scene shows a night attack. Flares expose brief pieces of the battlefield while defenders fire toward movement beyond the wire. Confusion matters more than spectacle. Nobody possesses the picture, yet decisions must be made immediately. Lancaster gives a fine later performance. Barker is not a heroic rebel fighting the system. He understands the institution, participates in it, and slowly realizes that experience cannot prevent leaders from repeating a failure. The final movement away from Muc Wa becomes another dangerous operation involving civilians, wounded men, and uncertain routes. Ted Post keeps the production modest, which strengthens its feeling of warning. Instead of asking how America lost the war, the movie suggests the answer was visible near the beginning: abandoned positions, ignored history, and officials believing determination could replace an objective. Number 8. The Inglourious Basterds, 1978. Before Quentin Tarantino borrowed its title, Enzo G. Castellari made this Italian war adventure about American prisoners who escape military custody during an attack. Bo Svensson, Fred Williamson, Peter Hooton, Michael Pergolani, and Jackie Basehart form a group of soldiers being transported toward prison for offenses. When German fire destroys the convoy, the surviving prisoners decide to head for neutral Switzerland. Their plan is simple until they encounter soldiers they believe are German and open fire. The mistake reveals that the men were actually an American commando team carrying out a secret mission. The fugitives now face a choice. They can continue running or take the commando's place in an operation involving a heavily guarded train and a German weapon. Their indiscipline becomes useful, because none of them approaches the mission according to official rules. The film's signature sequence is the assault on the armored train. Gunfire, motorcycles, explosions, moving carriages, and men climbing across the exterior create the physical chaos associated with Italian action cinema. Castellari values momentum over realism, but the practical stunt work gives the sequence undeniable excitement. Fred Williamson brings confidence, while Svensson provides the leadership presence. Their characters do not suddenly become perfect patriots. They cooperate because survival, loyalty, and opportunity begin pointing in the same direction. This is the least solemn movie near the top of the list. It plays like a comic book cousin of The Dirty Dozen, filled with rough humor and impossible action. Yet its cult reputation still remains overshadowed by the later film with the altered spelling. Anyone expecting the newer movie will discover a different, wildly entertaining mission picture. Number 7. The Odd Angry Shot, 1979. Most Vietnam films focus on American forces. This Australian production finds its truth in boredom, joking, waiting, and sudden confusion. Graham Kennedy plays Harry, a special air service soldier whose humor helps men adjust to a place where long stretches of routine can be interrupted by a few terrifying seconds. Brian Brown, John Hargreaves, John Jarrett, Graham Blundell, and others form a unit that feels less like a collection of types and more like workers sharing a dangerous job. They patrol, write letters, argue about food, play tricks, and discuss home, because nobody can remain prepared for danger every minute. A memorable sequence begins inside the camp during casual conversation. The men appear protected by sandbags, routine, and familiarity. Incoming fire suddenly tears through that illusion. The transition is quick and untidy, capturing the experience described by the title, monotony interrupted by the odd, angry shot. Another moment follows the arrival of a letter showing that life in Australia has continued without one of the soldiers. The distance from home becomes a different threat. Relationships change, families adapt, and the men realize their return may not restore what they left. Director Tom Jeffrey avoids political speeches. His interest is psychological survival. Humor works like protective equipment, allowing the unit to acknowledge fear without speaking about it directly. When someone is lost, the film does not pause for an enormous speech or a swelling musical tribute. The survivors absorb the empty space and continue with the next task. That restraint helped the movie become an Australian account of Vietnam, even though international audiences rarely place it beside the better-known American films. Number 6. Breakthrough, 1979. Following Sam Peckinpah's Cross of Iron was always going to be difficult, and this unofficial sequel became almost invisible after release. Richard Burton replaces James Coburn as Sergeant Steiner, while familiar character names return in a story moved from the Eastern Front toward Normandy during the final year of the Second World War. The German military position is collapsing. Steiner remains disgusted by officers who protect status while ordinary soldiers carry impossible orders. He again encounters the ambitious Stransky, and their hatred survives even as political events make personal rivalries seem pointless. The plot also involves officers connected to the attempt against Hitler. General Hoffman, played by Kurt Jürgens, considers surrendering his forces to the Americans if the conspiracy succeeds. Robert Mitchum appears as an American commander whose advancing troops may become part of that arrangement. One of the strongest scenes places Steiner between German officers planning for a future without Hitler and soldiers still expected to fight as though victory remains possible. Burton's tired face communicates the absurdity, even when the screenplay explains too much. The battle scenes use tanks, artillery, ruined villages, and large groups of performers. Andrew V. McLaglen directs them in a more traditional style than Peckinpah, so viewers should not expect the fractured editing or psychological intensity of the original. Yet the film has value as a portrait of an army breaking into competing loyalties. Some obey, some escape, some protect rank, and others try to keep their units alive. Its production history and release damaged its reputation. It is not equal to Cross of Iron, but it is more interesting than its disappearance suggests. Number 5. The Passage, 1979. Crossing a mountain becomes war in this tense escape adventure. Anthony Quinn plays a Basque shepherd, hired by the French resistance to guide Professor Bergson, played by James Mason, and his family across the Pyrenees into neutral Spain during the Second World War. The route is punishing even before pursuit begins. Snow, steep rock, paths, exhaustion, and family tensions slow the group. Behind them follows a German officer played by Malcolm McDowell, whose theatrical cruelty turns the chase into something close to a nightmare. The most memorable sequences use the mountain landscape as an active threat. The refugees move along exposed ridges where one mistake could send someone into a ravine. Quinn's guide understands that speed may save them from the patrol while killing the weaker travelers. Every decision involves choosing between two dangers. A particularly tense passage takes place in a village, where the group attempts to rest without revealing its identity. Information moves faster than they do, and the officer transforms ordinary rooms into temporary traps. The film's tone can become exaggerated, especially when McDowell is encouraged to play the pursuer with almost operatic menace. Yet that strange intensity makes the movie memorable. It feels less like a documentary account than a wartime folktale in which a family is being chased by a symbol of occupation. James Mason gives the professor intelligence and vulnerability, while Quinn's authority keeps the journey grounded. Patricia Neal and Kay Lenz add weight to the family's fear. The Passage earned harsh reactions, but its photography and relentless movement deserve reconsideration. Few overlooked war films make cold, altitude, and distance feel central to survival. Number 4. Soldier of Orange, 1977. Occupation becomes a force that separates friends before any of them understands which choices history will call heroic. The film begins with Dutch university students enjoying youth, competition, parties, and confidence. Germany invades, and their world breaks apart. Some join the resistance. Some cooperate with the occupiers. Others attempt neutrality, or make one frightened decision that becomes impossible to reverse. Rutger Hauer plays Erich Landshoff, a character based on resistance fighter Erich Haselhoff Rolf Zema. Erich escapes to Britain, becomes connected to Queen Wilhelmina, and participates in missions across the North Sea. The movie's most memorable sequences involve nighttime coastal operations. Boats approach occupied territory, while signal lights, patrols, tides, and nervous contacts threaten to reveal everyone. These scenes feel more dangerous than huge battles, because a single sound or delayed signal can destroy the network. Verhoeven refuses to divide the former students into simple saints and villains. One friend's collaboration begins through weakness rather than firm ideology. Another resistance member becomes reckless. Loyalty changes according to fear, pride, romance, and opportunity. A party photograph from the early section gains painful meaning as the story continues. Viewers remember those smiling faces while watching history assign different endings to people who once stood side by side. Hauer combines physical confidence with emotional distance, suggesting Erich survives partly by moving forward before grief can catch him. Jeroen Krabbe and Derek de Lint strengthen the sense of friendships being tested beyond repair. Based on Haselhoff Rolf Zema's autobiographical writing, the film became a major Dutch production. Internationally, it remains overshadowed by Verhoeven's later English-language work, despite being one of his richest and most human films. Number 3. The Duelists, 1977. Ridley Scott's debut follows two French officers who carry a conflict through years of warfare. Keith Carradine plays Armand Dubert, a reasonable officer ordered to deliver a disciplinary message to Gabriel Faraud, played by Harvey Keitel. Faraud interprets the encounter as an insult and challenges him to a duel. That misunderstanding creates a rivalry lasting 20 years. Napoleon rises, conquers much of Europe, retreats from Russia, loses power, returns, and disappears again. Governments change, and armies cross nations. Yet Faraud remains committed to an argument whose original meaning has vanished. The duels are the film's famous scenes, and each has a distinct character. An early sword fight unfolds inside a cramped room where furniture limits movement. Another occurs in an open field, where exhaustion becomes more important than elegance. The horseback confrontation is striking, with the men circling and attacking beneath a landscape. Scott and cinematographer Frank Tidy create images resembling 19th century paintings. Natural light enters rooms, smoke hangs above the countryside, and uniforms make the officers' behavior appear even more irrational. Carradine presents Dubert as a man trapped by rules. He does not want the feud, but refusing challenges could damage the identity on which his career depends. Keitel's Farad turns loyalty to Napoleon into a religion and treats compromise as moral failure. The final pistol encounter changes the rules by giving Dubert an opportunity to end the obsession without repeating it. The decision reveals how differently the men understand honor. The film won recognition at Cannes, but remains overshadowed by Scott's later spectacles. Few movies show more clearly how pride can continue fighting after history has moved on. Number 2. Cross of Iron, 1977. Peckinpah views the Eastern Front through German soldiers while refusing to offer them glory, comfort, or a clean separation from the system they serve. James Coburn plays Sergeant Rolf Steiner, a soldier respected by his men because he understands how to keep them alive. Steiner has little interest in medals. His new commander, Captain Stransky, played by Maximilian Schell, wants the Iron Cross because his aristocratic family expects visible proof of courage. Their conflict becomes more important than the Soviet forces pressing against the German position. The opening battle establishes Peckinpah's method. Rapid editing, smoke, mud, machinery, and expressions break combat into fragments. Viewers experience confusion rather than clarity. Soldiers fire toward movement they can barely identify, and survival often appears accidental. After battle, Stransky attempts to claim credit for leadership he did not provide. He needs Steiner to support the false report. Steiner's refusal turns dislike into hatred. A later encounter involving captured Soviet women becomes one of the film's most disturbing sections. Fear, desire, humiliation, and sudden danger mix together, and nobody emerges with a heroic identity intact. War has damaged every interaction before it begins. Coburn gives Steiner tired intelligence and bitter humor. He is capable of violence, but he no longer believes the institution demanding it deserves respect. Schell makes Stransky dangerous, because he treats combat as a stage on which social status must be confirmed. The ending offers laughter rather than victory. Steiner and Stransky move through chaos, while the military world around them becomes too absurd for any serious response. Financial trouble hurt the production, but the result remains one of Peckinpah's fiercest films. Number 1. The Ascent, 1977. The greatest overlooked film of the decade may also be one of the most powerful movies ever made about betrayal. Larissa Shepitko follows two Soviet partisans, Sotnikov and Rybak, across the frozen landscape of occupied Belarus as they search for food for their group. Sotnikov is ill and weak. Rybak appears stronger, more practical, and better equipped for survival. When German forces capture them, those qualities take on different meanings. The prisoners are questioned by Portnov, a local collaborator, played by Anatoly Solonitsyn. He understands how fear can achieve what physical pressure may not. Sotnikov gradually accepts that escape may be impossible. Rybak searches desperately for an arrangement that will keep him alive. The film's unforgettable final movement follows prisoners being marched through the snow toward a waiting crowd. Shepitko fills the screen with white landscapes, dark wooden structures, and faces stripped of every social mask. Sotnikov's exhausted expression becomes strangely calm. Rybak realizes survival may require becoming someone he cannot respect. There are few conventional battle scenes. The central war takes place inside the conscience. Boris Plotnikov makes Sotnikov's weakness physical, while Vladimir Gostyukin makes Rybak's fear understandable. The movie does not present betrayal as one sudden choice by a simple coward. It shows compromises leading toward the next. Shepitko's black and white photography turns winter into both reality and spiritual landscape. The film won the Golden Bear at the Berlin Film Festival and became her final completed feature before her death in 1979. The Ascent does not ask whether you would fight bravely. It asks what part of yourself you would surrender to remain alive. That question makes it unforgettable. Across these 35 films, the battles change, but the warning remains the same. War is rarely as clean as the speeches used to sell it. Prisoners become planners. Heroes become frightened men. Officers protect medals, and civilians are forced into choices nobody should face. The 1970s understood that victory could still leave people broken, confused, or morally lost. That honesty explains why many of these movies were ignored. They did not offer easy comfort. Decades later, their discomfort is exactly what keeps them alive today. How many of these overlooked war movies have you actually seen? Tell us which forgotten title deserves to stand beside the famous classics, and name any 1970s war film we should cover next. Like the video, share it with another movie lover, and subscribe for more journeys into cinema's forgotten past. Because sometimes a great film is not truly lost. It is simply waiting for the right audience to discover it again.